பிரபல பத்திரிகையாளர் பால்கி சர்மா தினமலருக்கு சிறப்பு பேட்டியளித்தார். மோடி பிரதமரான பிறகு இந்தியாவின் வெளியுறவு கொள்கைகளில் ஏற்பட்ட மாற்றங்கள், இந்திய பெருங்கடல் பகுதியில் சீனாவின் ஆதிக்கம் அதிகரித்து வருவது குறித்து அவர் பேசினார். பைடன் அதிபரான பிறகு அமெரிக்காவுடனான இந்தியாவின் உறவு எப்படி உள்ளது, இலங்கையில் ஏற்பட்டுள்ள பொருளாதார நெருக்கடிக்கான காரணங்கள் என்ன போன்ற விஷயங்கள் குறித்தும் பால்கி சர்மா கருத்துக்களை பகிர்ந்தார்.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Dinamalar. Today we have a very special guest from Delhi, none other than our Palki Sharma Upadhyaya ma'am. Ma'am, thank you so much for accepting our invitation and gracing us over this show. Thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
So let us discuss about what has happened in the past 8 years in the India's foreign policy. We can say, we can see the word that is the new India, which is coming out from all the politicians as well as the diplomats. So what is the new India which we have achieved, ma'am? So from your point of view, what is the new India which we have seeing today in today's era?
What is new India? I would say, India is still where it was on the map. India still has the same people. What has changed, I think, is our attitude towards ourselves and the world. Specifically from the point of view of foreign policy, we often talk about strategic autonomy. And that's not the same as non-alignment as I understand it. Strategic autonomy means that you pick and choose what you want to do and who you want to do it with. If you look at the last few months, India participated in the Quad Summit in Japan. That was with America, Japan, and Australia. At the same time, India is buying oil from Russia. There's a lot of pressure from the Europeans. India is withstanding that pressure. Then we attended the BRICS summit with the leaders of Russia and China. We are diversifying our weapons imports. While Russia remains one of the big players, India is buying weapons from France. And today, as we speak, the I2U2 summit is on. It's a virtual summit, the first leaders' summit. So this is called the West Asian Quad. So you see, India is a player and a critical player in all the theaters. And that is a big achievement. We've not bracketed ourselves with one side. And I know that India always followed the policy of non-alignment. But in this day and age, if we look at the geopolitical situation today, the lines are very, very clearly drawn. And at a time like this, to emerge as a critical player for all the sides, for all of them to say that India is an important partner, is an achievement. The focus of India has squarely been on the neighborhood. Since the time Prime Minister Modi took charge, he tried to put his best foot forward, went to Pakistan, tried to invite leaders of SAARC countries for the oath-taking ceremony. And from that, we've seen that India has actively tried to work with Nepal, with Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka, with Myanmar, with Bhutan, and various other countries in the neighborhood. The going has not always been easy. We've seen what happened in Afghanistan, but the effort has always been there.
Okay.
That's what has changed, I think.
Okay, so putting Indian interest first is what the new India is doing according to your point. Ma'am, so what is India doing to counter-influence the rise of China in the South China Sea? Because we can see China is occupying like anything in the South China Sea. So what is India doing or India needs to do to counter the influence of China, ma'am?
See, South China Sea is not an immediate strategic priority for India. While India does talk about free and open seas, free and open Indo-Pacific, and India talks about a rules-based multilateral order, South China Sea is not, like I said, a priority, an immediate priority. Having said that, India is working with countries that have conflicting claims with China. For instance, we are selling weapons to Vietnam. The defense minister visited the country recently. We are talking about giving the BrahMos missile to the Philippines. And these are countries that are directly pitted against China when it comes to the South China Sea conflict. So to that extent, India is these countries and these smaller players. And in this region, India is in a very interesting position because, see, these countries cannot be buying weapons from China to fight China. For a Vietnam to buy American weapons would not sit very well with its people because of their history. You know, the Americans have a history with the Vietnam War and so on. So India emerges as a very interesting partner for them to collaborate with. So that is what we are doing in the South China Sea.
Okay, okay. So we can see the influence of China in the Indian Ocean also. So they have 99 years of lease of the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, and they have some influence in Maldives. So what India needs to do in the Indian Ocean also, because you said that South China is apart from our conflict or our interest. So what India needs to do in the Indian Ocean region, ma'am?
India needs to do a lot, I think. And you mentioned Hambantota. There's also the port in Djibouti, not that's one of the places that China has focused on. Then we have the Gwadar port. We've been looking at the developments in Myanmar and how the Chinese are strengthening their hold on Myanmar with the ports, and they want to take over the entire Mekong base region. So this entire region is part of China's expansionist focus. And India needs to do more to combat that. We are building alliances. The Quad is one area where India is working with like-minded countries, democracies, and partners to ensure that we can maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific. Beyond that, India is working with regional players, and we're talking about, so how do you pull these countries away from China's influence? They're all going into the Chinese debt trap because China is offering them money. Now, we cannot match the checkbooks of China. What we can offer is examples of what happens to countries that are buried under the Chinese debt trap. Sri Lanka is, I think, a fabulous example of how bad things can go. And then there are other countries. So India is building relationships. It is within, of course, we're also, increasing the scrutiny of Chinese businesses. It's not specifically about the ocean, but I'm saying that India's pushback towards China is not in one form or one direction. It comes in many shapes and formats. And India is doing its bit everywhere, building infrastructure along the border, increasing the scrutiny of Chinese businesses, building alliances, focusing on self-reliance, this whole call for Atmanirbhar Bharat. It basically is not just a domestic policy initiative, it's as much a foreign policy tool as well, because we want to make sure that we are self-reliant, and the pandemic has shown how much self-reliance matters in situations like these.
Okay. So one of the reason to start this Quad initiative was to counter the influence of China. So as we are speaking, the Quad has the Quad fulfilled its motive?
To answer that, I'd have to spell out the Quad's motive. And while we all see the Quad as an anti-China grouping, none of the Quad members have spelled it out in so many words. They do not call it a military alliance. I remember asking this question to all of the leaders, and I said, is this the Asian NATO or a mix between the NATO and the Red Cross? Is it the Red Cross? Because you're talking about vaccines. And but this time in the Tokyo summit, we saw some movement. They're looking at countering illegal fishing by the Chinese. So that's a start. The Quad has seen many roadblocks, so to speak. It was first talked about in 2004 after the tsunami. They did not call it the Quad then, but they came together for relief operations. In 2007, Shinzo Abe mooted the proposal, and then it was put on the back burner. In 2017, we really saw the Quad leaders coming together. And I think post the pandemic, we've seen the actual thrust when the top Quad leaders met in Washington, D.C. last year, and then again in Tokyo this year. So the Quad has been slow in delivering and in spelling out its objectives. But I think slowly but surely they are moving in the right direction.
Okay. It's been 2 years since the India-China Galwan Valley clashes has happened. In what stage does it meant for the India-China in today's world about the ties which is happening today? Are we back into the track, or are we setting a new track for the India-China ties, ma'am?
India-China ties are... the situation at the border has not really improved.
Exactly.
Right? The tension still remains. Even if you look at today's newspapers, they talk about tension at the border. The border talks have not resolved anything. We've had long rounds of talks. Sometimes headlines say 14 hours of military level talks and so on and so forth. But it has not really changed the situation at the border. I would say that India should see Galwan as a warning. But first we saw Doklam, then we saw Galwan. And if even after this, India does not prepare for a bigger offensive, then the fault will be India's, because China's intentions are more than clear. China is an expansionist power. There are no two ways about it. China sees itself as the Middle Kingdom. They have this superiority complex, and India needs to prepare for what is coming. It's not going to be easy. Remember, last year, despite the hostilities, India-China bilateral trade crossed $100 billion. So decoupling from China is going to be very difficult. But like I said earlier, it is happening on various fronts, from scrutinizing Chinese businesses to imposing a de facto ban on Chinese 5G operators in India, to the IT raids and the IT action that we've seen against some of these big mobile companies from China. So a lot of those things are happening, but India needs to focus on the military threat from China, and I think that is being done. I think the whole reason why things came to a head around Galwan was the fact that while China keeps building infrastructure on its side of the border, it does not appreciate it when India does the same. But that has not stopped India. We're building roads, we're building bridges, we're building infrastructure to make sure that if the situation arises, India can deploy troops and resources at the border to counter a Chinese attack.
Okay. So many diplomats have suggested that India should rethink about the ACT policy, or it should rethink about the regional comprehensive economic partnership. So what is your take on that, ma'am? Should India actually rethink on what needs to be done for the RCEP?
I think India's position of not joining RCEP is an absolutely right decision, because it gives undue advantage to Chinese businesses in the Indian market. Having said that, not joining RCEP does not mean that India is not engaging with its Eastern partners and with ASEAN countries. That can happen irrespective of RCEP, and that is happening, I dare say. So I don't think that there is a need for a rethink on joining RCEP.
Okay. So we can see that India is now emerging as a big global leader in the world, particularly in the Southeast Asia or Asian countries. So can we see in a decade that India has a global leader or an emerging power in the Asia or in the world itself, ma'am?
India is already an emerging power. It is a big player in Asia. Exactly. A global leader in the world depends on what you think is a global leader. On a lot of fronts, India is a leader, but clearly India needs to do a lot more on healthcare, on education, on ensuring a standard of living, because only having the strategic pull and being able to harness your big market is not going to be enough. We need to give our people the resources and the standard of living that they deserve. So India has a long way to go. So a decade, maybe not, but if we stay the course, then I'm sure at some point.
Okay. So there is a say that all this we had a smooth kind of relationship when we had the bilateral relations with the Republicans, and Democrats seems to be somewhat difficult to handle for both India as well as Prime Minister Modi. So what is your take on that? Even as you mentioned, in 2017 the Quad really came together and it has operated well. After that we can see that the Quad is not active as much it was in the last year of when it was Trump there and Shinzo Abe in Japan. So at that time it was very active. So do you think that this kind of policy transmission during this Democrats and Republic is true?
I don't think so. I think that there is bipartisan support for India in the US, and the government of India has worked very closely and very smoothly with the previous democratic regime. If you talk about this dispensation, Prime Minister Modi, when he took charge, Barack Obama was very much the president, and they had meetings and they had collaborations. Then Donald Trump took over, and we all remember the scenes. The Howdy Modi event in Texas and whatever else followed, and then Trump's visit to India. And even with Joe Biden, I think at the G7 summit, you must have seen those visuals of Modi standing and Biden walking up to him to shake his hand. And that was shared a lot on social media. So from where I see it, I don't think that there is any discomfort or lack of engagement with the Democrats vis-a-vis the Republicans. I think New Delhi shares a pretty solid equation with Washington, D.C., and the US sees India as a very important partner and player, whether they like it or not. India is central to their policies in the region. And Joe Biden has long announced an Asia pivot. And if he is to do anything in Asia, he will have to have India in his corner.
So what kind of lesson should we learn from the Sri Lankan crisis? Because we can see emergency situation has arisen in the neighboring country of Sri Lanka. So what kind of lesson does India need to learn from the Sri Lanka?
I would say not just India. I think Sri Lanka has lessons for everyone, for people, for leaders, for countries. The first lesson, obviously, is that don't spend more than you earn, because then you end up with a lot of debt. And when you are not able to service that debt, you are in serious trouble. And even a country can collapse. The second is that and this is not a problem with India, but there are very many economies that are not very diverse, and you need economic diversity to sustain yourself. In the case of Sri Lanka, they depended very heavily on agriculture and tourism, and the pandemic hit both. The pandemic hit tourism, certainly, and agriculture was hit by the poor policies and the fertilizer decisions and so on. And I'm sure you know how things panned out after that. So that is one. The third, and I think the most important lesson, is that parliamentary majority, no matter how big that majority is, does not guarantee the continuity of a government.
Okay.
Because when people rise and when they want to make themselves heard, then no leader, however strong, can withstand that tide. So it's important for leaders all over the world to always be in tune with the aspirations of their people, with the needs of their people. You cannot take the people for granted. At no point should you start thinking that you are the country. You're not the country. You're just a leader appointed by the people, chosen by the people to deliver for them. And that is something that, and this is not, like I said, this is not about India only. This is about every country, every leader, every individual can take lessons from the Sri Lankan story.
Okay.
What timeline can we expect the situation can become normal for the Sri Lankan country or for the Sri Lankan people? Because people are very angry about whoever may be the Prime Minister or President. So their angry is not yet justified. And so what is the timeline we can expect that Sri Lanka will be back into track, ma'am?
Last month, I interviewed the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, and he said 2 years at least is what they need to bring the economy back on track. But that was then. That was when things were still happening within a constitutional framework. Now we know the president has fled the country. There is a lot of uncertainty, political uncertainty. We have the next 30 days to see who is going to be appointed as the president, the prime minister, what shape does the government take? Because at a time like this, when they have no food, no fuel, holding another election is a very, very expensive proposition. At the same time, who are you going to appoint to talk to international agencies, to the IMF, to the World Bank, to other countries and donors? So you need a points person, you need a government in place. I think the first priority is for them to have a government in place. The economic recovery is going to be a long and slow process and a painful process. And so 2 years at least, I would say.
Okay, ma'am.
So the recent resignation of the Prime Minister of England, Mr. Boris Johnson, as well as the assassination of Shinzo Abe. So what kind of issue this is? This would react in the foreign policy of India with both the countries, because they said that the prime target is India, because both of these members have been one of the prime close associates of India as well as PM Modi. So what is your take on that, ma'am?
I'll start with Shinzo Abe. I think in the death of Shinzo Abe, India lost a very special friend, and the Prime Minister himself has penned an obituary and a message, and that goes on to show how deep the relationship was. But that loss apart, I think it'll not have a bearing on the relationship between Tokyo and New Delhi. Shinzo Abe's party just won an election with a thumping majority. And the Prime Minister did meet Prime Minister Kishida of Japan, and they seem to share a good equation and they're working together. So I don't think there's a difference there. Apart from the fact that, of course, that's a loss, a personal loss, and India has expressed condolences with the people of Japan. As far as London's relationship with India is concerned, I don't think there is any change. I think the Tories are still going to be in power even with Boris Johnson gone. So there's every reason to believe that there will be policy continuity.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am. So, according to you, what needs to be changed or what needs to be done in the Indian foreign policy, or what needs to be approached in the Indian foreign policy, ma'am?
What needs to be done? We need to do more of what we're doing. We need to do it more assertively. We've seen signs of that recently, post the Ukraine conflict, the statements that Minister Jaishankar has made and told Europe that you're buying more oil in one afternoon than we buy in a month. So that was good to see. That sort of assertiveness was much needed and long overdue. What we need to do is keep investing in our regional friends. Some of these situations are not ideal. For instance, in Afghanistan, India is committed to helping the people of Afghanistan, but at the same time, you don't want to legitimize the Taliban. There is a security risk that they pose, and they provide safe haven to terrorists. So how do you navigate that equation? That is one. Nepal always remains a challenge. There is a historical connect. There is also there are some outstanding issues, including land dispute that keeps coming up. So those are going to be difficult to maneuver. Then again, Myanmar, the Chinese are expanding their control there, and we share a 1,600-kilometer long border with Myanmar. The generals are very much in power. India has not censored them, but India is also talking about the return of democracy as the largest democracy in the world. So the going is not going to be easy. The thing to do is to balance principles with realpolitik, and at all times preserve national interests. So that is what needs to be done, I think.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your time, ma'am. It's been a great interview for me, and so thank you so much for your time and spending so much time with us, and it would be great for our viewers too. So thank you so much for your time, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. All the best. Bye.